Yo, what's going on, everyone? I'm Julian, and this is the Inside Scoop podcast. Joining me today in the virtual studio, a couple of dear friends of mine who I also happen to work with a lot, some big names in the high school girls hockey community, Mr. Brandon Spratt, Mr. Matt Harrington. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having us, Julian. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to do a girls. We're going to cover Class A, Class AA as most as we can. Some of the brackets have not been officially released as we're recording, but we'll try to do our best we can. We're going to do a playoff preview and give you guys all some pretty good content. So we're really looking forward to this. I just want to start with just a little the Breakdown Magazine Girls A preview. I just want to kind of get your guys' like the preseason, your overall thoughts. We had Warroad, Orono, and Dodge County 1, 2, 3, which has been that's pretty much panned out to be what it has been all year. North Shore was the preseason 4, South St. Paul at 5, Laverne at 6. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, I think, as you said, the top 3 really panned out. Obviously, all 3 of those teams with a lot of returning talent. Beyond that, there definitely were some questions, even as I have Audrey Garton, formerly of Holy Angels, over my shoulder here. I did have some questions of how good Holy Angels would be this year, and they backed it up with another great season. But, a team like North Shore, obviously coming into the year, we found out they were going to be co-oping with that sort of some of those former Duluth Marshall players, and they had a really, really strong regular season record. Now, the strength of schedule is another maybe question, but we'll see how that pans out. And then South St. Paul, we know, is always dangerous. So it is tough to have these preseason rankings.
Yeah, and just kind of adding on to what Brandon said there, Julian, I think, it's always difficult when you don't know exactly, the programs, how are those going to shape out. The North Shore one was interesting because it was kind of a late co-op in the late summer, so we didn't really know how that was going to shake out. But always tricky and tough when you don't have a full 100% idea of how everything is going to go. Overall, though, I think things, at least at the top, played out to what we expected.
Yeah. You guys said it well. It's I think the Laverne choice at number 6 is tough, and then Wilmer at 9. Unfortunately, those teams just didn't really pan out like they were expected to. I know Proctor Hermantown came in at 11, so they were snubbed from the top 10, which is just so crazy. Brandon, you mentioned this before we started recording, to have them not your top 10. That's ridiculous. They're always going to find a way. That's a program that they're going to figure out how
the
to
track
win.
record is certainly there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just kind of to give you guys a little bit of some context heading into some of the big teams that were supposed to be great. Most of them ended up being around the top 10, top 15. I want to move into right now section 1AA or 1A. Oh my goodness, messed up already on the live recording. So 1A, this is the section kind of in the southern region of the state of Minnesota. Dodge County comes in at the 1 seed. Not shocked at all. We got Albert Lee at 2, Simley at 3. This is a pretty small section, though. We have only 5 teams.
Correct. Yep.
And so Dodge County gets the automatic bye. They advance to the semis. They are going to destroy either Winona or Red Wing, I think, in the semis. Give me Albert Lee over Simley. I haven't been super impressed, even though Simley, part of the Twin Cities. I get it. Albert Lee, I've been a fan of them all year, but Dodge County, they're a team that made the state championship last year, and they returned a lot of those big-time girls, and they've been a team that's been competitive. Earlier on, they tied Minnetonka, and that's been, arguably the best team, regardless of class in the state. So this Dodge County team is for real. I think they make it back to the X.
Yeah, that was an eye-opening result, certainly early in the season for Dodge County, and they've clipped along really nicely all season. Interestingly about this section, I'm pretty sure it's the exact same bracket as it was a year ago. Simley ended up upending Albert Lee last year to get to the section final. So I think look for Albert Lee to be hungry. They have a little bit of a point to prove off a little bit of a playoff letdown. They defeated Dodge County 2 years ago to make it to state. So there is a little bit of a revenge factor there, especially for 2 teams that did not play in the regular season. So I really do think Albert Lee is going to give Dodge County its absolute best. I would probably agree with you, Julian, but I think it's far from a foregone conclusion like a couple other sections maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brandon, 100%. I think when you look at these teams, I think you've got Dodge County pretty clearly the number one. They earned it. Albert Lee's not too far behind. And then you've got everybody else, I think, in this section. And, I had the opportunity to broadcast that Rosemont-Albert Lee game last week. Albert Lee did lose to Rosemont 4-0, but that's a really good Double-A team in the Rosemont Irish. I was still impressed. In fact, they actually outshot the Irish 31-30. They have a goaltender in Moyer who has 10 shutouts on the year. That leads the state. Her numbers indicate that she's probably going to be a Jory Jones finalist for the Albert Lee Tigers for Senior Goaltender of the Year. I've been impressed with Albert Lee, and I look at some of these other results that they have too. They beat Mount Westonka Southwest Christian. That's a high-quality win. Look at the result to Warroad on December 27th. They lost 2-1, but think about where they were 2 years ago when they lost, 15-1 in the state tournament to the Warroad Warriors. They've come a long way since then. So I've been impressed with the Tigers. Yes, they've played a softer schedule than a lot of other teams. Dodge County really beefed up their schedule this year. That probably is going to help them significantly. But I am expecting Albert Lee to give it, like Brandon said, they're going to give them a fight, and we'll see what happens. But I would be shocked if it was anybody other than Dodge County or Albert Lee that comes out of this section.
Oh, yeah. No way. I don't think Simile. I mean, no way Dodge County's making it out of
Yeah, Julian, you're going to hear me pull in this resource quite a bit here on the program. If you're familiar with the page stat rankings at all for boys and girls high school hockey, it's
I've heard of it.
A wonderful resource. You can find it. I want to give proper credit. Lee, Lee Pagan, PAGEN.com. I use it a ton throughout the year to sort of figure out, okay, where did it's a mathematics-based ranking. Strength of schedule goes into it. It's not my resource, of course, but it's one of the top resources that a lot of, I think, us that really follow the minutia. I mean, we're talking nitty-gritty, nerd out details here, but it's a resource I'm going to pull in. And one thing that I would note, Matt, as you said, for Albert Lee, they lose that game, but Rosemont is one spot ahead of Dodge County in the page stat rankings as of last week. So you're talking a comparable team, and you were giving me some of the scouting report of that game saying Albert Lee was absolutely not out of that game. So you're looking at a similar type of opponent, and I think that's a great game for Rosemont to play for Albert Lee to play heading into their section.
Interesting stuff for sure. I wish we could talk about the section more, but we unfortunately do have to move on. I want to now advance to Section A, a little bit more of the Western teams, kind of more in my region. And I live in Albertville, for people who know and if you even care. A lot of these schools, we got Hutchinson, Litchfield, Dassel, Clocato. They'll meet in the quarterfinals. River Lakes gets the number one seed, so they'll play the winner of them. Over on the other side of the bracket, Minnesota River, they get a first round bye as well. They play the winner of Wilmer and the Mankato West. I want to give hopes that Wilmer wins that first round game. I mean, I feel like I got to give them that, considering they were a preseason top 10 for a lot of people in Girls A. However, Minnesota River, they have a great record, and they've been a program who has been a fringe top 10, top 11 girls Class A team this year. I mean, I hate being boring, but it looks like it's going to be a River Lakes versus Minnesota River section final. It's going to be close. I don't really know a ton about River Lakes. However, I'm going to go with Minnesota River, the 2 seed coming out of this section.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here, Julian. I think really what stands out with Minnesota River, last season, they weren't even a thought to come out of a section like this. I mean, last year, I believe they were the number 5 seed out of 6 total. So you think about jumping from 5 to 2, that's a serious jump. And their record this season obviously was outstanding. They finished with a 17-5-2 record. You mentioned their borderline Care 11 top 11. I think we had them in a few different times throughout the season. So they've played some of these other Southern Minnesota teams really tough. They just tied Marshall this past Saturday, a scoreless tie. But I think when you look at Minnesota River, no matter what happens, I think they have to be proud of the season that they've accomplished. They were not somebody, I don't even think preseason we would even be talking right now about Minnesota River potentially going to the state tournament. So they've done a terrific job. And you look at the record compared to River Lakes, and you would think that maybe Minnesota River would be the 1 seed, while River Lakes is the 1 seed. They have the 12-1 overall record. They did beat Minnesota River 4-0 back on January 16th. So that's partially why they do get that record. But it does look like River Lakes and Minnesota are kind of the top two. Keep an eye on Hutchinson. They started out the season really strong at the number 5, kind of slipped a little bit. That could be a team to keep an eye on if they can get past Litchfield, Dasko, Cato. And then, Wilmer, we mentioned it. They've been a disappointment, no question, but they certainly have some talent in the expectation to potentially advance and maybe get to a section final perhaps as well.
I just want to add one thing real quick. River Lakes, yes, they did beat Minnesota River 4-0 in head-to-head, so I think that's kind of the big reason why they got the 1 seed despite having a 500 record. However, River Lakes is on a 4-game losing streak to finish their season. Just saying, I think it could be difficult for River Lakes, right? They would most likely play Hutchinson in the quarter or in the semis, and then for them to make it past Minnesota River, I'm just saying. I know they have the head-to-head over Minnesota River, but I mean they're gonna have to turn things around like that to come out of this one.
Yeah, and I'll add real quick. I think the theme of this section, there's some really good goaltenders. Cadence Roski, who's going to go to University of Minnesota Mankato, or Minnesota State University Mankato from River Lakes. You have Annika Magali, who's having a really good year for Minnesota River, and then Wilmer with the strong netminder as well. So expect a lot of lower scoring games. The goaltenders are good, and if there's one thing we know about low scoring games, it definitely can lead to some variety. And there's familiarity of these opponents, too. I mean, LDC and Hutch are conference opponents. Wilmer and River Lakes on opposite sides of the bracket, granted, also conference opponents. So, I mean, honestly, I think it will probably be one of the top 2 teams, but Wilmer might have a bullet to fire in here. If I had to lean toward a team, I am going to lean toward River Lakes, but I don't think it's an overwhelming favorite or anything even close to it.
Yeah, it's a really close section. We'll see. I mean, we got Minnesota River, we got River Lakes. I think those are the 2 overall favorites. It's got to be one of those 2 teams, I think. We're going to go take a step into Section 3A. The bracket's not officially out. I was looking at the Breakdown Magazine prediction. They had Laverne. I mean, they were the top team. They had them most likely to win this section. Marshall has been a squad that has been inside of our top 10 as well. They've had a phenomenal record this year, but they've started to slow down a little bit coming into January, and I think Laverne still might get the number 1 seed because they just beat Marshall in their last game. So it's tough to really say, about some of the other teams. However, I've got to go Laverne as the 1 seed in this section, followed most likely by Marshall. Overall, I mean, Laverne and Marshall have been, Laverne's maybe been a little bit more disappointing than Marshall has. Laverne, however, is on a 5-game winning streak heading into sections. They beat New Ulm. They did beat a good Minnesota River team as well out of A. I want to go for Marshall because I've been always kind of rooting for them. I remember they played Eden Prairie this year, and Eden Prairie was disrespectful, started their backup goalie, and then Marshall ended up winning. So I think not a lot of teams are giving Marshall enough credit. But right now, Laverne's kind of entering November in a hot streak. They do have the head-to-head over Marshall, so right now I think they're going to be my favorite out of 3A.
I think I'll actually lean toward Marshall to get the 1 seed because those 2 teams did split in the regular season. I think Marshall, the overall resume is going to still carry them to the 1 seed. Granted, it probably will be both of those teams in a section final. Again, Laverne has been to state out of this section 5 years in a row, so clearly there's some experience, a well-trodden path from Laverne to St. Paul for the Cardinals. One other thing I'd like to note as well, shout out to speaking of Cardinals, shout out to the Fairmont Cardinals who had a really nice year winning 14 games, likely parlaying that into a home playoff game. I had a chance to go down to Fairmont last year for the girls 15A state tournament, and really, really nice people down there. The rink is, I mean, it's everything you'd expect of a really small southern Minnesota town on Interstate 90. So it's going to be interesting. Marshall Laverne probably playing for the 3rd time. That game will be at Gustavus, I believe, on, I don't know the date, but coming up in a couple weeks. If they do play, it's really tough. I think I would maybe lean Laverne as well to get back to state, although I do think Marshall will get the number 1 seed. But it just shows, especially here in Class A, we see this in AA too, but I think really in Class A, there's a lot of intrigue of 1 versus 2 seeds that really are not a given by any means.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this section as well, like 1 versus 2, does it really matter in the end? To be honest, not really, because both of these teams are going to get buys into the semifinals. They're not going to have to play a quarterfinal game. And so I think overall, though, when you look at this section, and it's hard not to root for Marshall and want them to succeed. It's been a fun story. We've had them on the Care 11 top 11 pretty much since, I want to say, like week 4 or 5, and they've been in it every week since. It's been impressive to see that growth. And then you've got Brooklyn Mock, who's one of the state's leading scorers. In fact, I think she is the state's leading scorer out of this section. So, but then again, you look at Laverne, and as you mentioned, Brandon, 5 straight section championships. Every year they've found a way to get it done. So it's hard not to pick them in this one. But it does look like Laverne and Marshall, sort of like what we saw out of 1A. I think those 2 teams are pretty clearly the top 2, and then everybody else. So it would shock me if it wasn't one of those 2, but I think overall, Laverne or Marshall is going to be a spectacular representative for Section 3A in the state tournament.
Yeah, and quick note on Brooklyn Mock, I got it pulled up here. She does have a chance still for the Triple Crown, so to speak. Currently tied for second in goals with 45. Is 5 behind Mercury Bischoff, so that could be a little bit of a mountain to climb, but she's tied for second in assists with 33, 1 behind the state leader, which is Sarah Stauber. And she does lead the state in points with 78. So Brooklyn Mock has a chance to finish as the leading scorer in the state this year. And, we'll see more good things from her in the future, just a sophomore.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, lots of good things out of A. I love the Marshall story, though. It's been really
awesome.
Yeah. To get to know them.
And it was great to have, we had Brooklyn on as our player spotlight a couple weeks ago. Our first ever on the road player spotlight, her and her coach doing that interview on the bus on a road trip. So that was really, really cool to see. Appreciate Brooklyn coming on our Inside the Bubble show for those of you that don't know.
And I will note quick, too, before we move on to 4A, that Marshall was the 1 seed last year.
Okay.
And they lost to Laverne in the section final. So maybe a little bit of revenge factor there as well.
Well, we'll have to see. Time will tell. We'll know in a few weeks. We will move on to 4A. This has been certainly the most stacked section so far. And we do have a bracket as well. So we have a little bit more to go off of. Holy Angels earns the number 1 seed. They were definitely the favorite to win it, I think, in the preseason, and they had a very solid year. I know we saw a little bit more losses and some ties with them as well, but they play a lot of really tough teams, and they play a lot of big-time AA programs as well. So I think it's well-deserved for them. The 2 seed is going to be South St. Paul, so they get themselves an automatic bye. Blake should roll past Visitation, no problem. I think that's going to be an awesome semifinal game between Blake and South St. Paul. I'm going to give the slight edge over South St. Paul, even though it's not officially in the city of St. Paul, but I'm a St. Paul boy, so I'm going to favorite them a little bit. Plus, Blake has looked a little iffy, again, heading into the last couple of weeks of the girls' regular season. I think for Holy Angels, they pretty much dodged a bullet, right? The 1 seed in this section is so big because you don't really have to play. If you're the 1 seed, you don't really have to play anyone who is going to be that great. On top of that, you get the first round bye. They'll most likely, I would guess, they'll meet either Chisago Lakes, who was a breakdown top 15 preseason team. They came in at 14, and they're going to be the 5 seed in this section now. They play Minneapolis. Whoever wins that, I got to go Holy Angels. This should be a free ride to the section final. That other semifinal game, South St. Paul and Blake, it should be a nail-biter. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a 1-goal game. However, Holy Angels, they know how to make it to state. They did last year. They were the 1 seed, if I'm right, last year in the state tournament. They didn't make it maybe as far as some would have expected. I think this is a little bit of a revenge tour for them, and hopefully they'll win some games at the X when they make it.
Go ahead, Brandon. I know you're the Holy Angels alum here.
Well, indeed. It's interesting as well because both of the arguably the biggest wins for Holy Angels from a section seeding perspective came in like the first 2 weeks of the year. They defeated South St. Paul on the road and then Blake, and it's a little risky to have such big games so early, but they were able to win both. And then just last week, in fact, on Tuesday, South St. Paul defeating Blake by a score of 3-1, and a game reminiscent of the section final last year between SSP and Holy Angels, because South St. Paul against Blake was 3 for 7 on the power play. All of their goals coming with the man or the player advantage. So that's kind of the book on South St. Paul. You gotta stay out of the box. They have a deadly power play. Of course, with Lily Pockle, the Harvard commit running the show, but then you have goal scorers like Alita Ahern, who is really outstanding as well. And then Blake, they were the surprise team out of this section, of course. Won 5 games a year ago, upped it to 14 this year. They're gritty, play great, just really solid hockey. They are not a fun team to play against. But only 3 goals in their last 4 games and dropped 3 of those 4. So they're going to be scoring challenged. That Blake SSP rematch is definitely interesting. You know, who's going to come out on top? I really honestly don't know. I mean, SSP has the higher end talent, but there's not a lot of depth there. If they can stay out of the box, that being Blake, give Janie McGaughan, their fresh Dartmouth commit, in goal. I think one of the best goalies in the state. Give her a little bit more of a chance. They definitely have a chance to get back to a section final as the Bears look to get to another Class A state tournament.
Yeah, and I think, Brandon, you talked about this, just the improvement from Blake. It's been massive, right? They won 5 games a season ago. For them to jump into a spot where we're talking about them getting potentially back to the state tournament is a massive accomplishment. Sort of like we saw with Minnesota River, right? They were not a good team last year, and they've completely turned it around. And you mentioned Janie McGaughan. I think certainly one of the best goaltenders in the state. She has over 1,100 minutes played. She played in all but 1 game in the regular season. Save percentage is almost at .950. Like, that's unbelievably good. So credit to Blake for turning things around. But yeah, Holy Angels. And one thing that was not mentioned, I don't think, by either of you guys, is that this section is a little bit different from the others because the high seed hosts every game. So there will be no neutral site championship. If Holy Angels gets to the section final, which is very likely, I would say, section final is going to be played at Richfield Ice Arena. That was a big theme, I think, last year, Brandon, in your game when you saw them against South St. Paul in the section final, and that home ice advantage that you traditionally don't get in other sections. So that's a huge advantage to Holy Angels. Obviously, they played Blake twice, win in a tie, and then I believe the shootout, technically overtime loss in that game because it was part of the Breck Crosstown Cup. But really, I think you're looking at either Holy Angels, Blake, or South St. Paul. But again, it's just, this is one of the better Class A sections. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, we'll see. I did not realize that. I guess I never really thought of it, that this is the one section that has, you know, whoever the high seed is in the game, they get the home ice advantage. Like you said, Matt, 99% chance, right? Holy Angels makes the section final. I think getting home ice is huge for them. Even though, I mean, whoever makes it, right, between Blake or South St. Paul, they'll bring the students, they'll bring the crew. You know, they'll have a good fan base there as well. But it's going to be tough to beat a team like Holy Angels, especially that has so much AA experience this year in their non-conference schedule, to beat them on their home ice in a section final. We're going to go to 5A now. This I'm really excited for. So Orono is the 1 seed, who, I mean, they're practically a AA team. I mean, they have wins recently over Moorhead, Andover. They've tied Benilde St. Margaret's. They beat Centennial Spring Lake Park, who has been, for most of this year, the #1 team in girls AA hockey, a team that is going to be a favorite to win the AA state championship. So for the Orono Spartans to beat them, that's really big, I think. The #2 seed, we get Breck. What's interesting about that, they played earlier this year. Orono had the 2-1 overtime victory over Breck. So a potential rematch there. That could be another potential overtime thriller. Mount Westonka Southwest Christian gets the 3 seed. They'll play Princeton Becker Big Lake, which should be an easy win. Mount Westonka is a little bit scary just because they play such a tough schedule as well, but they just really don't have the record to show it. But by no means for Breck is this a game that they can look past Mount Westonka and just think this is an easy win. Although the Mustangs do get the first round bye, they're right away going to be forced to play a fringe top 10, top 15 team in Class A. Orono should roll past either Pine City or Delano. I mean, sorry, Delano Rockford. Sorry, Pine City, but you're just not beating Orono. My prediction is Orono Breck in the section final. I'm a little biased towards Breck. I just called their game against Wyzetta. I love Breck, how they are such a young team. I mean, their top line are just freshmen. They've got an 8th grade starting goaltender. I talked to her dad before the game. I mean, she is someone who really takes the game seriously, and really gets upset when she's not performing, and I saw her against Wayzata, and by no means is Wayzata the best team, but a late conference opponent. They're just under a 500 record, and this Breck team really beat the pants out of Wayzata when I got to call their game, and a team that is led by freshmen. I mean, it's so crazy. However, I do think the inexperience will hurt them in this game, and I do have Orono winning Section 5A.
Yeah, it's hard not to pick Orono, Julian, I think, with the experience that they've had. They're the 3-time defending section champions. But when you talk about Breck, this was a team last year that was the 3 seed. They ended up playing Mound West Tonka at Mound West Tonka last year in the section semifinals. I got to call that game. It was really competitive. You could see that Breck was sort of on the cusp of something really good. And I think in a lot of other sections, Breck would come out of this section. And I still think they could. But you certainly have to give the edge to Orono, because when Orono is at full strength, they can beat anybody, A or AA, and I firmly believe that. I mean, you've look at some of their wins, and it's amazing. They've been, 2 or 1. If they didn't play such a difficult schedule, they would probably be the number 1 team in girls Class A other than Warroad. So what they've been able to accomplish this season is impressive. Breck obviously has taken a big step forward. We expected that with their young players. Taylor Hall has been fun to watch. We talked about Ulrich on the blue line and Milinkovic in goal. It's a fun team to watch, and they're going to certainly give Orono a challenge if they can get there. But you mentioned Mound West Tonka Southwest Christian. They had a 15-win season. That's a solid team as well that also plays a difficult schedule. So a lot of things to be happy about if you're the Breck Mustangs. It's been a great season for them. I still think maybe they're a year away from getting back to the X, but we'll find out. This section, I think, is going to be a lot of fun, especially that 2-3 potential matchup between Breck and Mound West Tonka Southwest Christian.
Yeah, Matt, you pretty much said it. I think for Breck, it's, you never want to say next year while it's still this year, because the opportunity is right there. And I love the coaching staff there at Breck with former Olympian Tricia Loma, the head coach, former PHF player, had to get my acronym right, former PHF player Michaela Boyle behind the bench as well. Love that coaching staff. I think they're just 1 year away, because Orono, I mean, this is the year for them. They are stacked. They have seniors Macy Rasmussen, Zoe Lopez, and others leading the charge. I got to call 2 of their games this year, and the first one was the game against Centennial's first loss of the entire season, without Kimbrell or Rasmussen. And then they did the same thing against Holy Angels without 2 of their top 3 players up front. They're defeating arguably a top team in both classes. And oh, by the way, they've been missing Callie Schmidt, another one of their top forwards all season. She got hurt before the season in a non-hockey sport, and she has not played all year. And I thought coming, when you looked at this team, I thought was maybe their best pure goal scorer, maybe outside of Zoe Lopez. So, the fact that they've been able to do this, they're hitting their stride. They are the one team I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here. I think Orono is the one team who legitimately can prevent a Warroad 4P.
I think that's a fair assessment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Very possible. We'll see. I mean, Warroad's been great. They did beat Warroad this year up at the Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. But
Which is why I've had them at number 1. I can't speak for anybody else.
We can get into our whole rankings. For those who may or may not know, all of us are a committee for the Minnesota Hockey TV rankings for boys and girls Class A and AA. So we discuss rankings a lot and who we should put up as the official Minnesota Hockey TV Care 11 rankings. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation we can get into, Brandon. But I mean, at this point, don't even get me started. Okay, 6A. 2 words. Fergus Falls. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, it's only a 4-team section, Julian, so it's the smallest in the state. And unfortunately, the bottom 2 teams in this section, which would be Morris Benson, who is winless, and then you have Prairie Center, who only has 2 wins, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I mean, this is Fergus Falls to lose. Like you said, you don't want to diminish any of the other teams. They've all worked hard this season, but I think it's pretty clear that Fergus Falls has been good this season. Their overall record on the year entering section play is 13-11-1. So it doesn't jump off the page or anything like that. But what has been impressive, they do have a lot of depth, I think, forward position as well. You have Hannah Johnson, who's their leading scorer. And, of course, you have Maddie Greenangle, sophomore defender who had a really good year this year as well on the blue line. 12 goals, 16 assists. So, this is not as bad of a team as some people might think looking at the record. I think they might give a game to somebody in the state tournament. I don't know. We'll find out. But they are looking to get back for the third year in a row, made in 23 and 24. But, yeah, it's Fergus Falls. No questions here. At least from my standpoint. I don't know if Brandon or Julian has anything different.
I will return my time. Fergus Falls beat Northern Lakes 8-2 a couple weeks ago. I think the Lightning could keep it a little bit closer. Last year's section final was 5-0, but anything short of a massive upset is going to see Fergus Falls making that trip down 9.
We'll see if the Otters can do it. Proctor Hermantown gets the 1 seed. They just tied North Shore 3-3 in their last game. North Shore gets the 2 seed. I mean, this is a section that is most likely going to be North Shore and Proctor Hermantown in the section final. Proctor Hermantown has a few big wins. They beat Rock Ridge 7-0, Moose Lake 4-0. I think those two teams, Proctor Hermantown should breeze past Moose Lake or Cloquet-Esco Carleton in the semifinals. North Shore, Rock Ridge, I've seen them play once. They were down against Holy Family this year, and unfortunately, they were really no test for Holy Family. I have not seen North Shore. I know they have a great record, but I think if I'm going to really do a quick analyze for North Shore and Proctor Hermantown in the section final, Proctor Hermantown's a program, we know they know how to win the big game. I don't know which either of you two, if you know, I mean, this is a team that has consistently made it out of this section for a long time now. I actually am looking here. They have won it, looks like 4 years in a row. Cloquet-Esco Carleton snuck in there a little bit. I mean, this is a team that has a ton of talent. They play, I think the biggest thing here is the strength of schedule. And I'm just not sure if North Shore really has that over them. And when I have to, even though I love that North Shore gave them a great game, it was tied up at 3. But when it comes to the big one, the section final, the drive down 35 to St. Paul, Minnesota, I got to give it to the Mirage. They are a team that they can compete when they play their best hockey. I'm not going to sit here and say they can beat anybody in the state, but I think they can beat most teams, at least in Class A.
Yep, I think you nailed it right there. And one thing with Proctor Hermantown this year, even with that strength of schedule, it's a good record. I mean, 18-6-1, but their losses, and I called them a couple weeks ago against Benil, their losses have not been particularly competitive. Fortunately for them, nobody even close to the strength of Benil and St. Margaret's is going to be opposing them in section play. One thing I would look at with that game, as you said, against North Shore just last week, a similar thing happened last year. Last year in the regular season, Proctor Hermantown played what was formerly Duluth Marshall, but the best players on this year's North Shore team are from last year's Duluth Marshall squad. It was a 4-3 overtime win last year in the regular season, and then come section final time, 4-0, a pretty routine and straightforward win. So I think you might see something similar to that this year, just being honest. I think the depth of Proctor Hermantown is just always going to be good. And what they might lack a little bit, I mean, this is a program that when they won the state title, that team had, I mean, a good handful, up to even maybe half a dozen Division I players on it. They don't have that this year. They are led by Jane Ekstrom, who's going to go to Division III Hamlin. She's been a fun player to watch. She actually broke onto the scene at the state tournament just a couple years ago as a freshman, and now is already a senior leader. It's just crazy how quickly it goes. But I think the depth of Proctor Hermantown is going to be too much. They're going to wear down North Shore, but it's one final shot for them and their guns, which it's Nina Thorson and Ella Stauber. Definitely names to keep an eye on. Thorson with 33 goals and 61 points. And Sarah Stauber, I mentioned her a little bit earlier. She is the state leader in assists with 34 entering playoffs.
Yeah, and Brandon, I think when you talk about North Shore too, it's maybe a team that we had them in our rankings, I believe, to start the year, and they kind of just flew under the radar. We had them fall out after the first week, then they came back in, kind of been flying under the radar since. Did struggle a little bit, but yeah, you mentioned Nina Thorson, one of those players that comes over as part of the Duluth Marshall co-op. 33 goals on the year, 28 assists, 61 points. That tie obviously is a big positive sign for them, given the fact that you look at Duluth Marshall, and how they fared last year in the section final, 4-0, as you mentioned. But overall, I've been impressed with this group of North Star players, and then Proctor Hermantown certainly as well. I'm predicting probably going to give the slight edge to Proctor Hermantown, but North Shore certainly has the talent to get to the state tournament, and they did lose and tie. Of course, they got upset by Cloquet, did North Shore. They're probably thinking they're lucky stars that they're on the other side of the bracket in Section 7A, but they are going to have looks like Rockridge or Hibbing Chisholm in the semifinal round. So we'll see what we get, but Proctor, Hermantown, North Shore, pretty clearly 1 and 2 here in this section.
All good stuff here. We have one more final section for Girls A before we move on to Double A. So we've got 8A, and it's Warroads to take. They have won it so many years in a row now. It looks like, 8, 7 years in a row, maybe more. They've won the past 3 state championships. They have been the number 1 team in Girls A for the majority of the year. The section bracket currently not up, and we do know Warroad will be the number 1 seed. I could see Crookston in there in the mix as well, who could most likely earn themselves a first-round bye as well. I would imagine it'll be those 2 teams in the section final. Warroad has both head-to-head wins over Crookston. One thing, just looking at Warroad's overall schedule, they've had a lot of close games, and they really haven't played. Part of this is due to their region. They really don't have a lot of Double-A experience. They've played Moorhead a pair of times, Roseau a pair of times. They did play Andover, who they did lose to. They played Holy Family as well. But I want to look at the second half of the year. They have a lot of games where they have been decided by 1 or 2 goals, or maybe just a few goals. This isn't the most dominant Warroad team I think we've seen. This isn't the most dominant team from Warroad that we've seen. I think they have a pretty clear and cut path to the X again. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Based off the strength of schedule, I think this could be Orono's year. We'll have a state tournament preview with you boys as well coming up in a few weeks, but just something for you guys to toss around. We could be seeing the Spartans ruining the four-peat here, but in terms of 8A, I don't see any other way. It's going to be Warroad.
Yeah, it's tough not to pick Warroad. I think they're pretty clearly the favorite here. When you look at Crookston, last year we talked a lot about, this is Crookston's year. They've got a chance to get to the state tournament, upend Warroad. They were up 2-0 going into the third period of the section final last year, and they blew it. Lost 3-2 to Warroad, who, of course, moved on to the state tournament. So this year, they're 13-10-1. They won 17 games last year. They are definitely not as strong as they were a season ago. They went through some really rough stretches at the end of their schedule. They lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, 6 of 7 coming down the stretch. Now, granted, a lot of those were to some Double-A teams: Roseau, Bemidji, Champlain Park, Coon Rapids, Centennial, Spring Lake Park. So they played a little bit more of a difficult schedule, but then they lost at Warroad 6-0. They lost 3-1 at home against Warroad. So, they lost 2 head-to-head games to the Warriors. I'd be surprised if it wasn't Warroad and Crookston, but it's going to take everything and more for Crookston to get past Warroad. I think they've had a great season. There's a lot to be proud of, but I don't see a way in which Warroad doesn't get back to the state tournament.
Yeah, only thing I'll add to that is Campbell Friggy is a very good goaltender for Crookston. It is the type of goaltender that you never know. It might take a heroic 50-save type performance, one goal allowed. That's the type of game that Crookston will probably have to win. And you know what? Crazier things have happened. It's not unheard of. I did see Crookston against Holy Angels earlier this season. Their top group, their top 5 skaters and their goaltender, I think can compete with Warroad, but it's just the depth. The Warriors' depth. I'm looking at their stats right now. They have like a dozen players with double-digit points. They have 4 players with between 35 and 50 points, 2 players with 20 goals, Taylor Reese and Jaylee French. I feel like a lot of people in the cities just don't get to see this team play, but there is a ton of talent. Is there as much high-end talent as Orono as we, potentially look ahead if those teams get there? I don't think so, but Coach Marvin is going to get this team playing the right way. When I think of Warroad hockey, I just think of skating. The skating ability Every line that comes at you can just skate. They are so hard to slow down. And this year compared to last year, there has been improvement. The goaltender, Peyton Raleigh, has settled in and had a really good season. 9 save percentage. I think this is a complete Warriors team, and I don't see them getting stopped before the act.
Highly unlikely in my books. I think we're all right here. We're going to move on to AA girls hockey. We'll go back to the bottom, starting with Section 1. AA. Farmington earns the 1 seed. They will play the winner of the play-in between Austin and South Central. The Tigers should easily win that. Owatonna, Mankato East go up against each other. Owatonna earns home ice advantage for that. One thing I think that's interesting, the section final is going to be played at the Four Seasons Arena in Owatonna. How cool would it be if Owatonna were to win against Mankato East and then upset Farmington in the semifinals, then to get a home ice section final game? That would be kind of cool. Over at the other end, Lakeville South, the 2 seed, they split the head-to-head with Farmington this year, so it just kind of had to go based off of, I think, regular season performance that Farmington did better. Northfield, the 3 seed, were projected to be, for the breakdown, projected to be the best team in this section. Last year, they made it out. They lost their best player, Isla Puppy, if I'm saying her name right.
I believe so.
I think so. I mean, the loss of her, Miss Hockey, she was tremendous, and now on the Minnesota Gophers. Big shoes to fill for the Northfield Raiders. I think Lakeville South and Northfield would make a pretty cool section semifinal game. This is close. Owatonna's had a decent year. There's a lot of decent teams out of the section. No disrespect. It's one of those sections where whoever does end up making it out will most likely be a first-round exit in the state tournament, unfortunately. That's just how it is. There's so many other great teams out of other sections that I think should easily wipe the floor. However, I'm going to go Lakeville South. I think for boys, they're going to make it to the state tournament. I'm going to go with their girls. The number 2 seed punches their way to the act.
I like it. I would say, barring something unexpected, the winner of this section will very likely be the number 8 seed come the state tournament time. As a note, they are going to seed 1 through 8 this year at the state tournament. We'll get to that more in our state previews. But if you just like the idea of, and I think I admit I can take this for granted sometimes too, when we're talking about who's number 1, who's going to win the state tournament. Sometimes the good season is just winning your section, beating the teams in your region and getting there. And if you want that, this is a really, really good section, because you could tell me that there's a path for 5 teams to get to a section final, and I would believe you, because I really think there is. Farmington had a really nice start to the year. They beefed up the schedule. They have been creaking of lately with ties against Hastings and Eastview, losses to Lakeville South and Prior Lake. There's some good wins on there, too. They've beaten Rosemont. They've beaten Apple Valley. They beat Northfield at the holiday tournament, likely to earn the 1 seed. I will also give credit to Northfield. You said it. The scoring punch, it looks different without Isla Puppy, of course, but they didn't just fold up like a tent either. Clearly, there was some talent behind her. Macy Mueller and Mia Miller. That's a lot of M's, by the way, a lot of a certain consonant, but they're the 2 stars, one in goal in Mueller, and Mia Miller, the future Maverick at Mankato. So this section, I'm intrigued to follow, because I don't really know what's going to happen. Farmington, still a really, really young squad. They got a really nice team coming up. A player like Taylor Risch, and then you have, I'm blanking on the name, but there's good players coming up there. I think they are the most talented team overall, but some of those late results are making me question things a little bit from the Tigers' perspective. So to answer your question, Julian, Owatonna, yes, I definitely think they could play a home game in a section final. However, they just lost to Mankato East, and then were seated ahead of them, and they tied their other meeting. So you told me to throw a little shade on some section seedings I disagreed with. This is the one that I'm like, I don't get it.
Well, I think, Brandon, we talked a little bit about, Farmington earlier this year, and they were in the Care 11 top 11, I think at the 11th spot for a little bit. The potential is certainly there, but you mentioned they definitely struggled to close the regular season. Kind of, it was a win-loss, somewhere in there. But I think one of the good things about this section is you look at that 8-9 matchup. That's new. This was an 8-team section last year. Austin, who only won one game, had to go up against the juggernaut Northfield Raiders, and they got smoked 18-0. Now, granted, Austin actually has improved quite a bit this year. They did win 5 games, so credit to the Packers for getting a few extra wins this year. But whoever wins that is going to have to meet the Farmington Tigers. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned this. I don't know if there's a section in AA that might be more wide open. I mean, I feel as though there's several teams that could come out of this section, whether it be Farmington, Lakeville South, Northfield. Maybe you get a team like Owatonna out of the 4. It's not impossible for a team seeded 4 or 5 to come out of the section. We saw a boys team come out of the 5 last year in Cretin-Derham Hall. We saw another boys team, I believe, Elk River was the 4th seed. It's not impossible. Section seedings are not, the be-all, end-all. In the end, that's why they say play the game. Let's play the game, see what happens. Farmington, I've seen a lot of good things out of them. I've been impressed. They've played close with some of the top teams. Minnetonka only lost 3-1 to the Skippers. So there's a lot of potential there with this Tigers team, but they're going to have to earn it, show us why they deserve to be the section winners.
Yeah, it's super wide open. I think it could be a number of teams. I like the point that you made earlier, Brandon, about how for a section like this, right, most likely whoever wins will be the 8th seed, would have to go up against, it could be an Edina, it could be a Minnetonka, Centennial, Spring Lake Park, right? And most likely it'd be a first-round exit. But for them just making it to the state tournament and more importantly, winning against teams in their region, I think is kind of the big thing, right? Unfortunately, I think some of those teams and players have to be a little bit realistic with themselves and know in the back of the head, okay, probably not going to happen, right? We're probably not beating Centennial. We're probably not beating Minnetonka. But hey, let's go win, right? If you're Owatonna, hey, let's go pull off an upset against Mankato East, and then let's earn that home ice section final, right? That'd be something like that. I think it's really cool. I want to now go to Section 2 AA. Minnetonka might be one of the favorites this year to win the whole state tournament. They get the number 1 seed, followed by Holy Family. What's interesting about this section, the dark horse is Eden Prairie. Brandon, I know you know that I have called a lot of their games this year. This is a team, when they play their best hockey, they can compete, keyword, compete, I think, with anybody in the state champ or in the entire state, Class A or AA. This is a team that has taken Edina down to the wire. I actually called their game against the Hornets down in Eden Prairie, and they kept the Hornets off the scoreboard until about 2 minutes left in the third period. It was a 1-0 win for the Hornets. This is a team that went to Minnetonka and was a 1-point victory for the Skippers. So this is a team that can compete with those teams, and they play such a tough non-conference schedule as well. This is not a team that Holy Family wants to meet in the semifinals, right? Holy Family should get past Waconia, no problem. I don't think it's a given that Eden Prairie beats Chaska Chanhassen. They played in a game this year as well at the Midwinter Meltdown Tournament, their holiday classic in Eden Prairie. Chaska Chan, they've got themselves a pretty darn good goalie. I'm forgetting the name, but Chaska Chan, they beat Breck. If you guys remember, Breck just beat Dodge County and Holy Angels. And then the next following week, they go and lose to Chaska Chanhassen. So I think this Chaska Chan Eden Prairie quarterfinal game actually might be a little overlooked. I think that actually could be a decent game. And by no means is this a game where if you're Eden Prairie, you think this is a gimme. You have to go out and play hard. And you know that you're on upset alert, and Holy Family does not want to play you in that semifinal game. I'm still going to take the fire in that one. Holy Family's great, and although Eden Prairie, keyword, has been competitive with great teams this year, they really haven't been able to actually go and beat anyone that great this year. So I will give it to the fire. Minnetonka should cruise past New Prague. They should beat Chaco or Prior Lake, no problem. I do think we get a section final between Minnetonka and Holy Family. This section has been dominated by the Skippers for some time now. However, they haven't been able to win the championship. So this could be the year. This is a team that is led by lots of phenomenal players, Ruby Rao, Lauren Mack, in my opinion, the state's best goalie, and Layla Hemp. I think the Skippers will have a tough battle against Holy Family, but I think the Fire are just no match for Minnetonka, and they go back to the state tournament for another year.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Julian. And, Eden Prairie, as you said, not your average 3 seed at 10-15. I just called their final game of the season against Minnetonka yesterday, and something like half of their losses or more are to top 10 teams in the state. So it gives color to that tough schedule they played. But as you said, haven't been able to close the deal against anyone. Their best win being Grand Rapids Greenway this season. And that's a good win, but it doesn't inspire confidence that you're going to beat Holy Family and then Minnetonka in back-to-back efforts. Yeah, but that Holy Family EP game, they're two teams that like that defensive identity of hockey. If the Fire advanced to the section final, it would be the 5th in a row between the Fire and the Skippers. And in a way, it's interesting because you're talking about both teams that kind of have demons to exercise. For Holy Family, it's let's get the Tonka demons off our back and finally beat the Skippers and try to get to our first state tournament. For Minnetonka, it's we've had one of the best teams in state 5 years in a row and still haven't been able to close the deal. So it's a fascinating matchup. I think Minnetonka they're on a roll. They've found their groove. They do have vulnerabilities. I think a little bit on the back end at times, but like you said, Layla Hemp tends to cover those pretty well. She's the best goaltender in the country in her age group.
Yeah, and Brandon, kind of adding on to what you said, Holy Family and Eden Prairie presents a really intriguing semifinal matchup if both those teams win, because you may remember last year it was Holy Family that was the 3 seed, Eden Prairie was the 2, and Eden Prairie took the Fire to overtime in that section semifinal game. So the Fire had to earn it a little bit more than maybe they thought they would last season, and I'm expecting another really competitive game between those two teams in the section semifinals, assuming that they both get there. But you look at the talent on Minnetonka, they've got 8 Division I commits, the most of any team, I believe, in the state. The talent that is on that roster is incredible. That doesn't necessarily translate to a state championship by any means, but talent-wise, it's the Skippers to lose. I think Holy Family, a lot of their key players are in that junior class. Once they get to that senior class, Minnetonka is going to lose quite a few players from this year's team, including their 2 goaltenders in Hazlett and Hemp, who are both seniors. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I know of a certain coach in this section who's going to be very thrilled that the state seeding is now 1 through 8 instead of the random draw. So if you're watching, I think you know who you are. Should be fun to see who comes out of this section, but I'm going with the Skippers here.
Yeah, it's hard to bet against them. 8 Division I commits, most out of any team in the state. Doesn't translate. It doesn't mean you're going to win the state championship. I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was in high school a number of years ago. When this is for boys, Edina had, I want to say, like 8 or 9 Division I commits, and they lost in the semifinals. I think they lost, I want to say, to Duluth East. That was back when Ryder Donovan was relevant in the hockey world. And, you could have all these guys going to big schools or going to juniors and, playing in the USHL, whatever. And I think same thing for girls, right? You could have all these girls who are going to go play in college in Division I next fall. But, you got to win now. You got to win together. So
what if I present a little potential symmetry, right? You only have to go back to last year when it was the Skipper boys team that had all the D1 commits. They didn't make the state tournament. They lost to Chanhassen, who made its first ever state tournament appearance. Chan's home rink is Victoria. Holy Family's home rink, Victoria. Foreshadowing. Is it going to happen
see.
By the way, section final, Braemar Arena, same place. Who knows? Maybe the stars line. I don't really believe in that stuff, but when it happens, if it happens,
Sounds
you heard
like
it here
you
first. Do. You heard it here first. If it happens.
All right, let's go to Section 3AA. Rosemount gets the 1 seed. Followed by Cretin-Derham Hall. I know, Matt, I'm sure you have a lot to say about them being a Raider alum. However, Apple Valley beat Cretin-Derham Hall in the regular season and has a better overall record. So no disrespect. And again, it's the 2 and the 3. It doesn't really matter all that much. But if you really want to get strict and nit and gritty here, Apple Valley should be the frickin' 2 seed because they have the head-to-head. And they have a better record over CDH. So I don't know who made that. However, this has been a section that has been run by Rosemount for a couple of years. I had their senior captain, Sophie Stramble, on my podcast. Really nice girl and has a lot of expectations, I think, for Rosemount this year. I know if they make it back to the X for the third year in a row, they don't want to be thought of as the team that is a first-round exit, right? And I think Rosemount, they don't really have a ton of bad losses. I know they were competitive with Centennial Spring Lake Park to begin the year. I think we're going to see a Rosemount Apple Valley section final. Apple Valley led by Michaela Moran, who I think is the best player in the state. She has been phenomenal. I saw Cretan play once this year, and they are a solid team. I just don't know if they have anyone who's really at the top tier that could stop a Michaela Moran top line for Apple Valley. We'll see. I think that should be one heck of a game. Whoever wins that will most likely then meet Rosemount in the section final. Rosemount does play, if they were to beat Hastings, they would play either Park or Lakeville North. I've seen Lakeville North a couple of times. Lakeville North is not a team you want to mess with. They've got a lot of really young talent on that squad. And for those who are looking for an up-and-coming player next year, Michaela Lee, sophomore on defense for the Panthers. She suffered a season-ending injury in the game I called. Hopefully, she has a speedy recovery and can return next year. But I think she'll be one of the top juniors, not only in the conference, but I think in the state next year. But besides that, it's tough. I saw Rosemount play. I got the honor to call them at Hockey Day, Minnesota on the first day when they played. Oh, no, who was it? Do any of y'all remember who Rosemount played at Hockey Day?
Yeah, it was Lakeville North, wasn't it?
It was Lakeville North.
Was it Lakeville North? Okay. They did play Lakeville North, and they beat them pretty well. I know Stramel, she had a hat trick. She's something great. And shout out to Zoe Junker, a senior on defense for Rosemount. That's my buddy's younger sister. So hoping they all do well. Yeah. So
Matt, I'll let you take this with the Raiders angle first. I just would like to say, though, quickly, scanning some box scores, Michaela Lee did pop up in a box score last week, so I don't know if it was a season-ending injury.
Oh, good. I just remember I didn't see her at Hockey Day, and I remember
saving her for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's good.
They didn't want to show Rosemount their whole hand.
I guess not. I'm glad to see her back on the ice, and that's awesome, because I remember the injury she suffered. It was like probably the saddest injury I witnessed this year. Anyway, I'm going Rosemount in this section. I think it should be them and Apple Valley in the final. And Rosemount, I think they go for a 3-peat to make it to the X. Your thoughts?
I've got a lot of thoughts about this section. Well, first off, this is a section that historically the seeding really does not matter at all. In fact, Rosemount, the last couple of years they've come out of this section, they've been either the 4 or the 3 seed, I think. They upset Lakeville North last year, who was the 1 seed. Cretin-Derham Hall got upset. They were, I believe, the 2 seed in this section last year, and they lost to the 7th seed in Park of Cottage Grove. So you look at that, and the history of this section will tell you that Rosemount is not in a good spot, even though they are the 1 seed. Me and Brandon talked about this a little bit, but how is Rosemount going to adjust to being the hunted instead of the team that's the underdog? They're used to being the scrappy team that finds a way to get it done in section. This year, everybody's coming for number 1, and so it'll be interesting to see how they react there. And of course, I love Cretin-Derham Hall. It's my alma mater, but I really like this Cretin-Derham Hall girls team as well. They have a diverse group of scoring led by Abby Brose, who's a Franklin Pierce commit, averaged a point per game this year. Their goaltender, Grace Kemp, went 14-8-3. She's a junior. I think next year she's going to be one of the state's top senior goalies. .943 save percentage, 5 shutouts. They love the low-scoring kind of games where they grind out a 2-1 win somewhere in there. They played Edina and Holy Family close at the end of the season, 3-1 each. They've played Hill Murray close. I love this Cretin-Derham Hall team. I'm going with them to win this section, to beat Apple Valley and Rosemount. Raiders are going to state. You heard it here first.
Wow. I don't know how I follow that. I will say this. I've been noted to not be Apple Valley's biggest fan. However, I will back up Julian and say that them getting the 3 seed instead of 2 was a little bit puzzling. And I'm a little bit concerned because Eastview Burnsville is going to sound ridiculous. They're maybe the best 7-win team around. They're a team you don't want to face. They tied Dodge County on the road last week, and they tied Farmington just yesterday. I mean, this Eastview team is no joke. Jaden Slominski is a really good young player. I saw them earlier this season, went out to a game, and do not underestimate the rivalry factor It is now an Eastview-Burnsville combined co-op team against Apple Valley. The youth team, the Valkyries, is Apple Valley, Eastview, Burnsville. I mean, the storylines of this 3-6 quarterfinal are off the charts. It's going to be a lot of fun at the Apple Valley Sports Arena, which is not a fun place to call a game from, by the way. There is no good place to set up to broadcast. So we'll see. We'll get to that. I will say Apple Valley, I think, will get to a section semi. Shoe is on the other foot for Rosemont. Matt, you said it. They went to Lakeville North last year when Lakeville North was the one seed and beat them. The shoe's going to be on the other foot this year. Can this young Lakeville North squad do the opposite and knock off Rosemont? Maybe, but Park of Cottage Grove is not a pushover. They were within, if they got a late goal against Apple Valley last year, could have made a section final. I mean, can you tell I like the section? Now, I live in Burnsville, so that's, disclosure, right? It's the heart of my part of the metro area, but I think I do like Rosemont. I just think that this is a team that is set to push somebody a little bit harder at state this year. So I will go with the Irish to get to state. But Matt, I'll give you Cretin-Durham Hall in the section final. I think they can shut down Apple Valley. Apple Valley is a 1-line team. If you stop Moran, you can stop them. And I think you can take advantage of them in their own zone. So I don't think Cretin will be beaten twice by Apple Valley. And Cretin-Rosemont, a redo from 2 years ago. And would the Raiders making state surprise me? No, definitely not. So this is another section, though, like Section 1. I think there's at least 3 teams that could make state, and there's even more than that could spring an upset. So I'm pumped. I'm pumped to see the games in this section.
Yeah. I am as well. No question.
Yeah, this is going to be a really cool section. Lots of, we could see CDH, we could see Apple Valley, we could see Rosemount. It should be all good stuff. That's what makes this section so awesome. So Section 4 AA.
Not quite as interesting.
Not as interesting.
Woodbury
gets the 1 seed, which they never played Hill Murray in the regular season, so I get it. But also, looking at the bracket real quick, so I'm a Highland Park alum. I'm seeing it says St. Paul Highland Park plays Hill Murray. Shouldn't that be St. Paul Two Rivers?
Yes, but I believe Highland Park is like the host school.
Highland is a part of that co-op, so I believe it's Como, Highland Park, Two Rivers, and a couple of other teams. So yes, you are correct. It does throw you off, but technically they are the Riveters, I believe, is the official team name.
And they play most of their games at West St. Paul Arena. So why Highland Park is the team on the bracket, I don't know. But
a little confusing.
So we'll let our friends at the high school league decipher those sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not going to matter for their fates, though.
Well, okay, so I've had a hot take this podcast, and I've been saving it for this moment. I do think St. Paul.
I'm ready. Oh, you couldn't even spit it out. You're blushing.
St. Paul Highland Park beats Hill Murray in the quarterfinals. You heard it here first. No, I'm sorry, absolutely not. I bet my
You should
house.
just take the headset off.
I would
and walk away.
I would bet my car, bet my life savings that Hill Murray beats them. No disrespect to St. Paul Two Rivers and company. It was a little interesting to see Hill Murray get the 2 seed. I mean, I get like they never played Woodbury, and I mean in terms of record, I mean, yeah, Woodbury has one of the best records in the state. I totally get it. Woodbury finally played someone who's really good in Benilde St. Margaret's, and they lost 5-1. They host Centennial Spring Lake Park Tuesday next week at 7:30 p.m. And based off, I think, the performance against Benilde, I'm hoping it's a closer game, but I just think it shows that their strength of schedule is lacking a little bit. It doesn't help that the Suburban East isn't the best overall section or conference. They've tied Forest Lake. They've tied Cretin-Durham Hall, who are amongst the top in that conference as well. I do think we'll still see a Woodbury-Hill Murray section final, and I would love to see the Woodbury Royals beat Hill Murray. Like, that would be awesome to see. But I think Hill Murray's strength of schedule, again, it's going to overrule Woodbury. I will go with a slight upset, though. Nothing too big. I've got Gentry Academy beating Eastridge. How about that?
Ooh. All right. Yeah, this is... I'm intrigued by this section, maybe partly because I've seen all 4 of the top seeds in the last couple weeks, so kind of have an idea what they'll bring to the table. I agree on the seeding piece, although I don't really think it's going to matter much. What I will say, and I texted Matt this as we were going back and forth on our games on Friday night, The box score is not going to tell the full story of that BSM game. It was a 2-0 game with about 6 minutes left in the third, with Woodbury coming out of a timeout. They ran out of gas just a little bit, but it's not like their second and third lines were getting pushed all over the rink, right? I thought BSM was clearly the better team, but it wasn't like, this wasn't a game, it got within a goal of running time. It never felt like that really at any point. Woodbury plays really hard. They're a physical team. They're not going to back down. That said, if I would have seen that Woodbury performance the other night and gone back to Hill Murray of the first week of January that had just been running timed by Benilde and Edina, I think I would maybe believe in an upset, but I think Hill Murray is primed to go on an absolute tear through the section. They are playing unbelievable right now. Absolutely humbled Holy Angels on home ice by a score of 7-1 with a 6-goal second period last week. And, if you wanted to chalk that up to maybe Holy Angels, a Class A team, they don't quite have the depth of Hill. Hill Murray just backed it up and then put 6-0 on Maple Grove, which, while not a top tier team, they're always going to be a solid squad, tough to play against. Emily Pohl with 5 goals. This team is, I think, the hottest in the state right now, personally, and they're going to have a chance. They're going to get a third crack at Benilde St. Margaret's. The first time they lost by 6. The second time they lost with 1.3 seconds left. They're going to try to win this one and keep going into the playoffs with momentum. That said, their seed isn't going to change at all, and I do fear a little bit of bulletin board type material as well with them being seeded second in their section.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Brandon. How does the committee for the section, or I'm not exactly sure how it's decided with every section. Some do it by coaches, some do it a different way, whatever it may be. But you look at this Hill Murray team, they've won 5 games in a row. You mentioned it. They humbled Holy Angels. That was a massive win. They beat Maple Grove. That's 2 really quality teams that they've outscored 13 in the last 2 games. And I saw this team in early January after they had just been put into running time by Edina. It looked kind of like a depressed group almost. And it seems like head coaches Chrissy Wendell Pohl and Johnny Pohl have really turned this group around. They know that they've got the talent to compete not only for a section championship, but for a state championship as well. And the results speak for themselves. They have some really high quality wins on the season. They beat Moorhead. They beat Holy Family, Rosemount, among others. Andover, obviously a really good Class A team. Obviously, we're not going to count out the Woodbury Royals. They still have a couple of they have the one important game against Centennial Spring Lake Park. And then that'll be on home ice too. So that's a big opportunity for them. But another thing that favors Hill Murray, games are at Aldrich Arena, moving from these semis into the finals. So that certainly will favor Hill Murray. But Woodbury and Hill Murray pretty clearly 1 and 2, but I got to go with the Pioneers in this one.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add on that is, especially through that early January period, it really looked like the Pioneers were struggling with in the post-Grace Zahn era, which, I would too, right? Grace Zahn I called her an all-world goalie the other night, and that's not an exaggeration. She literally plays for the national team for China, and is their starter. But since that moment, they've really rallied. I thought coming into the year, this was the best team in the state in terms of their skaters group. It was just going to be finding that goaltending. And now I look up, and Piper Tam, the 8th grader, has 10 wins, has a 1.52 goals against, a 926 save percentage, and 4 shutouts. And that number was under 900 for a save percentage for a good chunk of the season. Clearly, she has found something, and the team has found something. They have newfound confidence in her, and she's playing at a really high level. Some of their recent scores, I'm thinking a 2-1 over Andover, a 2-1 over Holy Family, and a 2-0 against Dodge County on top of those big explosive wins. They're finding ways to win low-scoring games too, and I wasn't so sure they could do that. So Hill Murray right now, absolutely rolling, and I think they will continue to do so. That said, if you're looking for 2 players that just play the game the right way, Brooke and Lainey Ganetz of Woodbury, they are 2 of my favorite players to watch. They just play they play the game with such a pace and tempo. There's no indecision in their games. I really think the way that they play, that sort of controlled aggression, it sets the tone for Woodbury, and that's very much how the whole Royals team plays. So if those teams lock up in a section final, I think it could definitely be a treat, because Woodbury can bring a physical element to Hill that they aren't necessarily as comfortable with.
It should be a great section final. Hill Murray is one of the best teams in the state right now, and like you said, they're probably the hottest team right now. They've got a lot of good wins. We're going to go to Section 5 AA, the only bracket that's not involved or that's not out right now. Centennial Spring Lake Park will be the 1 seed. However, I was just looking. Champlain Park Coon Rapids, I think, deserves the 2. They beat Roseville Montemedi, and they beat Maple Grove. This is a section where there is a pretty large drop-off after Maple Grove or after Centennial Spring Lake Park, but right away in the semis, I think we should have some really good matchups. That could be between Roseville, Montemedi. It could be Champlain Park, Coon Rapids, Maple Grove, Centennial Spring Lake Park. That'd probably be my semifinal predictions. And then this has been a section that's been dominated so much by Centennial Spring Lake Park. It's been dominated by Maple Grove. However, the Cougs, they've just been so darn good this year. They've lost to Orono. And who else did they lose to? I want to
Holy Angels.
I forgot they have a couple.
So they haven't lost a AA game yet. Maybe Woodbury can change that.
Yeah, we'll see. I saw them play against Benilde St. Margaret's this year at their holiday tournament. They're really great. They've got such a deep team, and this is a team that really has just been so consistent. Besides those 2 losses midway through the year, they've found ways to beat just about everyone else. They're going to be my favorite. However, I think they'll be battle-tested, and teams like Champlain Park, Coon Rapids, Maple Grove, Roseville, Montemedi, whoever they get matched up with in the semis, I think will give them a good run for their money in the semis and in the championship.
Yeah, and I think, look at last year in Centennial Spring Lake Park. They lost 2 games. Both were to Maple Grove. They've beaten Maple Grove twice this year. Granted, one of them was a 2-1 win in overtime back on December 14th, in which they put 50 shots on goal against the Crimson. So the Crimson have had their number in the playoffs, and the numbers will tell you as well that it's either going to be Maple Grove or Centennial Spring Lake Park. One of those teams has won the section every year since 2018. So it'll be fun to see, but I am going to pick Centennial Spring Lake Park. Kaya Weiland is obviously coming over in a transfer, but she's been outstanding in goal, and I don't think it's going to be very tough to beat her. Of course, she went 14-0 last year. Numbers have been really good this year as well for her. So until proven otherwise, I think Centennial Spring Lake Park is the team that comes out of this section.
I would agree with that, although this section always presents at least some challenging games. And Champlain Park, Coon Rapids, Maple Grove, I agree with you, Julian, that head-to-head will probably give the Bluebirds the 2 seed, but they'll meet up in 2-3 anyway. I'm a little bummed we don't have the bracket in front of us because whoever plays North Wright County in the first round, not the team I would want to play whatsoever. Roseville Montemedi is hot, having won 5 in a row. You have Rogers, who they lost pretty much every team they played in section, but they're really not a half-bad squad. Sydney Bailey, the future Gopher, they've been offensively challenged, but they can keep the puck out of the net a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to upset one of the top teams, but they could make it uncomfortable for someone. And then North Wright County as well, they have a loss to Mountains View Irondale, which is that going to hurt their section seeding? Bump them lower than they could be? It might. Mountains View Irondale also pushed Champlain Park Coon Rapids to overtime just yesterday. So I think the talent gap from those 2 and 3 seeds to the rest isn't super big, and I think there could be some fun quarterfinals there. I do think Centennial Spring Lake Park just clearly is the most talented team, and I think the way that their section final went last year, I called that one. It was really a bitter way for it to end. They went up 3-0, ended up losing 6-3. So I think that they will get the job done this year.
I've got so much more I wish I could say, but we're well into this, and we still got 3 sections to go. So we're just going to move past it. Section 6 AA, it's going to be the Hornets and the Red Knights, I think, meeting again. This has been a section that Benilde can't get over the hump. I do think it's a little interesting how they did play in the regular season, and it was a 0-0 tie, and Edina gets the 1 seed. I guess that's what you get if you're the Hornets, right? Even though I understand they've maybe had a better regular season, but it makes sense, right? Edina gets the 1 seed. I mean, Wayzata, I think, can make things uncomfortable for Benilde in the semis, maybe a little bit. They've got a few decent players, but Benilde, I think, is on a whole other level. The big question is this the year that Benilde can make it over the hump and punch their way to the X. Edina is the state defending champions. They bring back a lot of their players, and the only teams who have been able to beat them, Minnetonka twice and Andover. So I don't know. If I really had to predict it, I mean, it'd be cool to see the Red Knights make the X. However, Edina is just a team that they always figure out how to win. They always find a way, and they just have the experience in winning the big game that Vanille just doesn't. Just based off of that, I have to go with the Hornets, unfortunately.
Matt, I'll let you bat lead off.
Oh, well, look, I think it's, let's cut to the chase. It's going to be Edina and Benilde in the section final, I would think, unless, something crazy happens. No disrespect to the other teams in this section, but Edina and Benilde are clearly 1A and 1B. Some people don't like the seeding, such as Julian. Look, it is what it is. Both teams get a bye to the semifinals. We all know they're going to meet in the championship, so it doesn't matter who's who. In fact, I think you could make the case that you might want to be the 2 seed. Edina was a 2 seed last year. They won in the section final, of course, over Benilde St. Margaret's. But I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with both these teams when I saw them play each other in a scoreless tie. The goaltending was great from both angles. You saw Benilde St. Margaret's, and look, that was a big problem for them last year, was their goaltending. They have seemed to figure it out a little bit more this year. And I think a potential rematch here at Parade Ice Garden on Valentine's Day evening, 7 p.m. That is appointment TV, as I like to say. So I am beyond excited to potentially be a part of that one if we get that one, and can't look forward to that enough. But yeah, it's hard to pick against Edina. I would love to see Benilde win, but I think Sammy Cowger, head coach of the Edina Hornets, is the best coach in the state. I think she's already one of the all-time greats. There's just a new level of fire that she brings to the bench, I think, during the section playoffs. And I think we saw it last year that it just means more for both of these teams. And Coach Cowger is obviously one of the all-time greats already. And hard to pick against Edina when they've won this section 10 years in a row, I think, now. So, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I know that. Plans for February 14th.
I was going to say, Matt, St. Valentine's Day, you might as well just pencil yourself in. I'm already looking at the undercard options. Perhaps Braemar Arena is calling my name this year. We'll have to see. No, and maybe Benilde being in red as the away team would favor them on St. Valentine's Day.
Yeah, perhaps.
But no, one thing I've noted with this Benilde team, and I saw it the other night against Woodbury, I saw it against Hill Murray. This is the most impressed I have been with the Red Knights team. They have taken seriously the defensive side of the game this year, which is something I don't think we saw enough from them in the past, quite candidly. All of their defense are just playing so well. I mean, Bailey Gray is having an outstanding season. Lulu Brzezinski, a little bit of an injury concern, so we'll have to see come section play. Both of those D1 commits having a great year. But then it's others as well. Brooklyn Riley, who is a big, sturdy player. She's going to play for the D3 Natty Champs, UW River Falls. She's had an awesome year. So it's just everybody really on the back end. And then for Edina, Matt, you just called them yesterday. It sounds like there is an injury concern for them on the blue line as well. I think if that particular player doesn't play, I might even have to give a little bit of a nod to the Red Knights. The other thing I will draw up that Benilde needs to do, they got to win a special teams battle some way, somehow. They got to stay out of the box. Edina's power play has been too good. These games tend to get a little physical and chippy, especially that we saw 2 years ago. That was just a travesty, but we won't go there. But then, Benilde, you got to stay out of the box. And if you get a power play chance, got to take advantage. They have the weapons. Tala Hansen, I'm going to start the Miss Hockey campaign for her early, a couple years early, start to lay the foundation, the grassroots effort. Tala is unbelievable, and maybe she's the catalyst that can finally push these Red Knights across. I don't know if they're going to get a better opportunity than this year. Although saying that, their sophomore class might be the best in the state, so maybe there will be more opportunities. But yeah, I agree with everything you said about Coach Cowger and Edina. It's just, yeah, this very well could be a state championship type of game.
This has the makings of a instant classic, I think is fair.
Yes.
This definitely could be an instant classic. It could be a state championship level game. Too bad that only one of them can make it to state. I hate rushing, but we got to get through these next two sections, boys. 7AA, Andover gets the one. My computer didn't want to update. Andover's going to get the 1 seed. They beat Grand Rapids Greenway in the regular season. They play Anoka. I think Forest Lake, if they can beat Duluth in the quarterfinals, they could make things interesting for Andover. They've got a really good goalie. But Andover, I mean, they've won this section, 7 years in a row now. The next team who I think can make a couple of dents into that, Grand Rapids Greenway, led by Mercury Bischoff, who's possibly can win Miss Hockey this season. She's had a great year. But outside of the top line, I don't think you can hang with the depth that Andover can. And Andover just, I think, too, being a part of the Twin Cities, they just have that better schedule versus Grand Rapids Greenway being in the region they are in. So give me the Huskies. And, I mean, this is a team, right? They have 8 losses, but when they play their best hockey, this isn't the best Andover team we've seen. I think it could be difficult for them to beat Edina, to beat a Centennial, to beat a Minnetonka, but it's really realistic, and I think it would make for some really good state tournament play.
Yeah, and sorry, Brandon, I'll make it quick so you can get to yours. But 8 losses for Andover is a lot, right? I mean, we're used to seeing them go through regular seasons with only 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. But it's a group that's got depth, it's got talent. Maya Engler, others on that team, and Grand Rapids Greenway. I'm not going to count them out quite just yet. I thought they played okay against Andover. They played well enough to where if they fix a few things, they can give a real game to the Huskies. It would obviously be amazing to see Mercury Bischoff in her senior year finally get through to the state tournament. What a great storyline that would be. But overall, Andover clearly the favorite. But I think if Grand Rapids Greenway can play like a near perfect game, everything has to align for them. But I think if they can do that, they've got a real chance. But like I said, there's no room for error, that's for sure, against a team like Andover.
Yep, you pretty much covered it. I think, it's one of those things in a game like that, that sort of adrenaline-fueled thing, it can be real and you never know. I think in the past, Andover would have been Sharpie. I think it's a little bit less than Sharpie this year just because Grand Rapids Greenway did have such a strong regular season, getting to 19 wins. Mercury Bischoff, I think I said right around Thanksgiving, the drive for 50 goals was on. She hit 50 goals in the final game of the regular season. Her first ever 50-goal season, which, I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous statement to make regardless. But I think my top 2 Miss Hockey candidates would meet in a section final. Mercury Bischoff, who I think probably will win it, and then Mackenzie Jones on the other side. It's hard to win Miss Hockey as a defender, but I do think she's the best overall player, most well-rounded player in the state. So that's obviously such a great matchup. They're going head-to-head. I'm not going to bet against Andover, but yeah, what a fairy tale story it would be. Would be awesome to see a team like GRG get to state, especially Mercury Bischoff. The state deserves to see a talent like her in St. Paul. We'll see if it happens.
We'll have to see. And moving to our final section, 8AA, Moorhead gets the number 1 seed, followed by Roseau and then Bemidji. This was a section, right, where it was between Roseau and Moorhead for a lot of the year. And whoever got the 2 seed kind of gets screwed because you really don't want to play this Bemidji squad. Although young, I think they feature the best sophomore in the state, in my opinion, Bailey Rupp. And Roseau beat Bemidji twice this year, but they were both close games. Bemidji did split the series against Moorhead. Not really sure why they gave the Spuds the 1 seed over Roseau. But again, it's really tough to tell. I've watched Roseau play a lot this year. Outside of their top 2 lines of Erickson and Remick, and they've got a third St. Cloud State commit in that list mix as well. They don't really have a lot of depth. Part of that's because of the school size, right? Only a few hundred kids go there. And I do think that the top-end talent for Roseau will outmatch Bemidji, especially due to the lack of experience that the Lumberjacks have. I think Moorhead should have no problem winning their section out into the section final. Rams and Spuds meet in the final again. Roseau took it last year, Moorhead the year before. I think the depth of Moorhead will be good enough to beat Roseau. Because all the games I've seen Roseau play, they're not a team that's going to beat the pants off of you, right? They play good hockey. They've got a great sophomore goaltender as well who can make things really, really great things happen. But the Spuds, I know they've had some tough losses recently to Orono, War Road, and Roseau, but I think they get back on the wagon and make it down to the X.
Agree with that. I think It's a senior class for Moorhead that's probably smarting still a little bit about losing that game to Roseau last year. It's going to be the same type of game, right? A really physical, solid team in Moorhead up against just that dynamic top trio. And Jasmine Hovd is the other one you're looking for from that group. Can that electric skill overcome what's a little bit of a size and a physicality advantage for the Spuds? If Moorhead can stay out of the box, I think they'll probably be okay. I just love how this team plays under Coach Ryan Kraft, and what a boost going into the playoffs to beat Andover in the final game of the season. I think that should just give them great confidence, and I think they will ride that wave back to the X this year.
Yeah, and I'll make mine short, but I think Moorhead, Roseau, obviously the clear 1 and 2 here. But Midgey is certainly a team to keep an eye on. You know, a potential first-round upset, maybe. I could maybe see Buffalo pulling off the upset over Bemidji if things go well. This is not a bad Buffalo team. They won 10 games this year. I saw them play against Edina the other day. They've got some talent. If they can put things together, they have a chance to advance to the semifinals. So keep an eye on the Bison there in Section 8AA. But if Bemidji gets past, they certainly could give a game to Roseau or Moorhead. But I would tend to agree Moorhead, I think, is in a good spot to potentially win this section and get back to the state tournament for the second time in 3 years.
That would be one hell of an upset to see Buffalo over Bemidji. I would love it. You guys both know I call a lot of Buffalo girls, and they've had ups and downs this year, but they are finishing the year on and up. That'd be super cool for them if they go into Bemidji and pull off the win. With that being said, thanks for everyone if you made it this far into the video. This has been the Inside Scoop podcast. Special thanks to Matt Harrington and Brandon Spratt for filling in and being my expertise on the show. Stay tuned for the next one. We'll have Boys Class A featuring Matt Harrington. Brandon, you're welcome to join us as well if you want to discuss some Boys A, and then followed by Double A featuring John Connolly, which should be an awesome episode as well. Thank you all. Have a good one.